Konik. He's a chief editor of the group of the companies COMNEWS. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ksenia. Thank you very much for this brilliant possibility to be present on this event. This is the third conference in which I have an honor to speak, and I wanted to start my presentation from a couple of slides that were presented 2 years ago in June 2018 in Ulaanbaatar. Why do I want to repeatedly show these slides? Next slide, please. Yes, just a couple of words. I was remembering about two LEOs for Global Star. They both were created in the year 1991. They were started 1998 and 1999, and in 1 or 2 years they went through the bankruptcy procedure. Next slide. We can remember those events. OneWeb and LeoSat. There were, for 2018, new moments for satellites, constellations, for broadband access, but the modes were pretty the same as the stories of Global Star and Iridium. So they were initiated almost in one and the same year, 2012, 2013. The planes were the same. And the next slide, speaking about the forecast that I tried to make this, I'm showing this red line from June 2018 from Ulaanbaatar. It is stated here that the biggest players, OneWeb and LeoSat at least, will go through bankruptcy process to clean their balance for the capex of USD billions, because they needed to clean their balances and to create the new brands and the new ways. The analysts love to speak about horizons of many years. Therefore, it is very interesting to pay attention to the forecast that is affected by 100%. So now, after 2.5 years, we are here almost in our days at the end 2019. What happened? LeoSat, in the summer of 2019, together with the Hispasat and JSat, they avoided the implementation of the first leg of investments in which they participated. They needed to invest $50 million into Series A. But because of the lack of investments, in August 2019, LeoSat fired all 13 employees, including the former CEO Mark Grigole, due to a lack of funds, and they have frozen their activities. De jure and legally, until now, the company is not formally a bankrupt. They're not frozen, but we can say that the project has no future here. It is after LeoSat in November 2019, Mark Grigole ironically said in his interview to the Space News the following: "I couldn't have dreamt up a worse scenario. This is like SoftBank suddenly saying to OneWeb, you're not getting any more money." And this is a very significant statement from Mark Grigole here. Next slide, please. And again, according to the words of Mark Grigole, after 3 months of this event, the SoftBank has cut down investments in OneWeb, and the company filed for relief under Chapter 11 of the Bankruptcy Code in the US, and the explanation said that the company was close to obtaining financing, but the process did not progress because of the financial impact and market turbulence related to the spread of COVID-19. Therefore, the key investors were also saying that they are going out of the project, and according to the information that I have, it was made several hours before the third leg of OneWeb that was affected on the 21st of March from Baikonur space. I think now we know what happened later. In July 2020, a consortium of UK government and Bharti Global, the Indian company, they committed to provide more than $1 billion to acquire OneWeb and fund its full restart of its operations. And 1 month ago, on the 2nd of October, the New York court has proven the reorganization of OneWeb and its way out of from the Chapter 11 of the bankruptcy code of the US. And at the end of November, we will get the full information to the OneWeb, and the former Iridium will go to the bright future. By the way, in line with the process of reorganization, the huge company who were the minority investor in OneWeb, they told that they will take part at the consortium of relieving of the company, and they will invest $50 million, a relative small sum, and they will help the company to go back to normal. Next slide, please. So principal differences of what happened after bankruptcies of Global Star, Iridium, and compared to the things that were happened with the financial problems of Amazon and Leosat. If it was a cold shower for Iridium and Global Star, and no investors 20 years ago didn't want to invest into low orbit constellations, the problems of Leosat did not affect any innovators or investors. Here on this slide, you see the logos of the only low orbital projects that are now in active phase, like middle orbital projects, O3b mPOWER of SS, the OneWeb that I was telling about, the Amazon project, Kuiper, Starlink, SpaceX, the Boeing satellite project. Boeing wants to try themselves for V-band. Chinese projects, Pomnian and Galaxy Space. Low orbital satellites project of Telesat, and two more projects for the low orbit for internet broadcast, Clio Connect, where Mark Rigol is now working, who formerly worked at Leosat, and Telesat Leo, and ELO projects of Eutelsat, one of the top four operators of satellite networks. And only these constellations on this slide are planning to put into orbit more than 20,000 space apparatus, space satellites. And along with the projects that you can see on the slide, there are additionally 45 enterprises that are planning to use non-stationary orbits to provide broadband access, Internet of Things, cloud services, and computing through satellite channels and mobile channels. Again, bankruptcy of OneWeb and Leosat and the financial problems were not affecting the investors here for Sputnik projects. Next slide, please. What happens in this time at traditional and main participants of the market of fixed satellite connections? Here is the big four financial statements of market players for the 9 months. This is the club of the grants of the big ones. SES, Intelsat, Eutelsat, and Telesat. I've collected all the financial reports for the 9 months in dollars from 2019-2020. And as you see, in 3 of participants of Big Four, the revenue in FY 2020 is cut by a certain piece compared to 2019, although 2019 is also not the best result. It was either cut down or stagnating. The only company that the revenue of which was not decreased is Eutelsat, but again, this company is also undergoing certain financial processes, and on the 30th of June 2020 they've presented the new report, and I think we can later see the decrease of the revenue by 3.2% compared to the previous year. And again, one more important detail on Eutelsat, who is also the member of the Big Four club, so to say. Generally, in 2020, Eutelsat underwent technical bankruptcy, so clinical death. They were not in full-scale reporting their bankruptcy, but they used Chapter 11 of the US Bankruptcy Code to get credit for $1 billion that will be protected from creditors. And Eutelsat wants to close the deal for UCC and to pay it out for the C-band deal. So this is the this is the information about the market, and you see that this is not the best condition of the market. Next slide, please. But again, as we know, along with the Big Four, there are many regional operators of satellite here on this slide, you see the countries that have their own satellites, or they are operating together with the other countries. And the gray countries, the countries that are provided in gray, they do not have their own space apparatus, and they don't have their own satellites. And there are less and less of such countries. And you see that the national symbol, along with the flag and anthem, is the satellite for many countries. What is the result when we see so many regional operators? Of course, they are dealing with regional tasks, but we also understand that the zone of any satellites is, of course, more than a huge or not so huge state and country. The operators that have one or two satellites, they are forced still to fill in their resources, and they start to introduce damping procedures. And at the end of the day, we see huge quantity of regional operators who start to deconstruct market. They create additional um, um, possibilities for the customers to purchase the services and broadbands, and they are affecting huge players and small players in the market also. Next slide, please. Here I want again to speak about top 4 low orbit projects, low and middle orbit projects. And let us take a closer look on what do these companies are planning to realize. NSR provided its evaluation that of 4 projects, Empower, OneWeb, Amazon, and Starlink by SpaceX, that during the next 5 years, they are planning to deploy to the low and middle orbits the satellites with overall capacity of 66 terabit per second. As compared with the geostationary orbit, all the other companies are planning to use the HTS class by about 10 Tbps. So this is 10 or 6 times less than the first example. You see here on the graph the blue and light blue graph, which shows the growth of capacities on geostationary orbit and on non-GEO HTS. Why it is so important and why it is so necessary for the customers in the future? Because the cloud computing, almost everything that was combined to cloud computing was already initiated before pandemics, 2019, 2020, and together with pandemics, this tendency will be supported. And again, in the whole world, we see the rise of 5G technologies, and together with the Cloud 5G provides for a huge uh, uh, for a new era of mobile edge computing, and the low orbit satellites are providing those capacities for every station, base station of 5G network. I want to say that when we speak about 5G triggers and 5G new generation, they are higher than the other diapasons, than the other B bands, like 24, 27 gigahertz. Therefore, base stations in 5G networks, there will be more base stations than in the other 3 or 4G generation. Therefore, the need in channels will also rise, and low orbital uh, satellites will be able to cover this market demand. Also, there is an important signal that this is already future. This is already our reality, that in December 2019, Amazon Web Services and Verizon formed a partnership to offer 5G network edge computing. This is a great step towards their partnership in calculation in 5G Verizon networks. And this is again proving the fact that low orbit constellations can be of a good use for integration of cloud solutions on every station. Thank you. Next slide, please. And this is the old story, but still we see it now reviving. We are speaking about low latency. Of course, the low orbit satellites have less latency than the geostationary orbit. We see this 40 to 50 milliseconds against almost 60 milliseconds. But still, there was every time a discussion. People were asking, are there so many business cases which would monetize the lesser latency in the LEO constellations? But again, COVID-19 was acting as a trigger for the new demand, and through the whole world, many people are forced to work on in a remote mode, or they're studying in a remote mode. Therefore, video communications platforms are very necessary right now. Video streamings and hostings are very necessary. For them, latency is a critical topic for their operations, and therefore we think that LEOs will still be in demand. And even after we will fight back against coronavirus, many companies are not planning to not planning the future when their staff members will go back to their offices, because they've calculated the corporate resources and arrived at this cost-efficient decision. One more signal which perhaps for pandemics was not seen. In March 2020, FCC, American regulator, proposed bidding procedures for this year's $16 billion rural broadband auction. We're speaking about rural connections in the USA, about internet in rural regions. They are planning to spend $16 billion in this year. And one of the key criteria in this contest is a round-trip delay, which is less than 100 milliseconds. So we're speaking again about latency, round-trip latency that is less than 100 milliseconds. So the time will be one of the differentiators on the market. And one more evident and ever-growing object for growing of the demand for satellites is online gaming industry. We're speaking about online gaming, about streaming, live streamings of games, and this is also another sign of the modern times, which provides for additional loads and which will be resulting in MEO and LEOs activities. The next slide here is ending my presentation, and this is not a forecast right now. all compared to the Ulaanbaatar, but this is an open question with multiple dots. But still, we need to think about it. What if GSOs, satellites, are the carriages of the past? Aren't they not too old? Because in some moment they became irrelevant when the Ford enterprise introduced their conveyor, and the carriage drivers were just sitting there and thinking that this is something new, non-feasible, and that they will last forever. And now we see the LEOs, constellations, that can be a Tesla of the future. They have more flexibility. They are more cost efficient, and they can be uh, they can use their links, and they can use the life cycle of 5 to 7 years, um, which is, as I already told you, cost efficient. And Tesla, by the way, is manufactured by the SpaceX as the LEO Starlink. Thank you very much for your kind attention.